Okay, well, I show 7 o'clock, so let's call to order.
Wagner,
Here.
sorry. Costa Vito, absent. Egar,
Here.
Egar.
Here.
Flores, absent. Hamilton,
Here.
Kotsinis,
Here.
Sutton, absent. We have a quorum.
All right.
Caroline is here.
Caroline is here. Caroline, say here.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
And Sutton's on her way.
Wake up a
Okay.
kid
In the
and
meantime,
get
you
a
wanna-
car key.
Would someone like to make a motion to?
I will move that we allow Celeste to join remotely through family emergency.
I'll
I'll
second that.
That was Wendy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries.
Sutton is
Trustee
here.
All right. I think we only have one item on the agenda, unless there is anyone who wants to speak in public comment. What?
Oh, because it's on the agenda.
So let's,
Pledge of allegiance or no?
we,
It's on the agenda.
Pledge is on the
oh,
agenda.
but just on the agenda.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have my agenda in front of me. Okay. Is there anything else before? No, unfinished business, yes. So let's move on to the facilities improvement plan.
So, Joe Huberty and David Benjamari are here with us this evening. And for new board members, David, first of all, we worked with David dating back to, I think it was May of 2024. And he spent a couple of days here. He observed how patrons use the library. He interviewed staff. He asked us, how do you observe staff using the library? And based on his observations, he developed this space audit report and gave us recommendations for changes we should make to optimize the library for our patrons, the way patrons use the library today. The board at the time thought, okay, this is great. Let's try to implement some of these strategies. Staff, we did implement what we could on a shoestring, and we'll talk about what we did on our own before we brought Joe into the picture and his team. But we've been working with Joe on this facilities improvement plan. The short-term facilities improvement plan is going to go into place in August, but here we're talking about parts of the long-term facilities improvement plan and what we possibly could do next fiscal year in terms of making those changes. So I think that's enough introduction. So Joe and David, take it away.
Remote control.
One of these?
Yeah.
Remote control.
The remote control is probably me.
Okay.
Sorry, that's one thing we didn't go over before. If you just say slide and I'll change it. So
All right.
sorry about that.
I got a remote control if you want. We can try this.
Yeah, we can attach one. I don't have one. So.
Okay. You know how it is when you got a
Easier.
screen in front of you, if you're not holding a clicker, right? Game doesn't go the way you want, you toss the clicker. Yeah, they know me at Spectrum, the guy. While we're waiting for that, the effort here is really a bit of a formalization of the concepts that were embedded in the space audit. We tried to really be true to the underlying concepts and really apply the next layer of specificity to that. You'll recall from the space audit, a lot of it is fairly diagrammatic, showing overall relationships. We took those and tried to draw in the individual components that were referenced in the plan. So when it talks about a certain type of seating, we drew in the seats. When it talks about computing, we drew in the computer stations. When it talks about collections, we drew those in. So really what we're hoping that you see is a further refinement of those underlying concepts with the intent of proving that the relationships work, that there's a practical implementable plan here, that you can work at it in stages. You can take as large a step as you would like to, and that the underlying goals of the plan of the space audit really can be achieved through something that is specific as what we're going to present tonight. The idea is that it gives you a framework, but doesn't lock you into specifics. You're in the middle of a continuing series of evolutions within service that really will continue to transform how the library delivers service to the community based on your residents' needs. So we don't want to be overly specific and lock you into one pattern of use within the building. Rather, we want to focus on the fact that the one thing that won't change is that it's going to be people coming into the building trying to utilize those services, and we come into the building with certain basic behavioral predispositions, and we want to acknowledge those. Make the building as friendly for an introvert and an extrovert as we can. Make it intuitive, and yet not give up the sense of surprise and wonder and delight that the building actually offers now. So part of that is don't do any harm. The other bit is make it more conducive to a first-time user and a long-time user. So if we pass that test, great. So as we're going through that, keep those things in mind. I do want to start out with a discussion about the underlying principles within the space audit, because without those, this is a little gratuitous.
And one thing I realized, I should have done a bio and then proper introductions, because I realized we have half the board is new. So I don't know if we'll start with David, and Joe, when you get the clicker back, you can give your introduction. So both David and Joe have quite a bit of experience working with libraries.
Yeah, so I teach graduate students at New York University. I've worked with public libraries since 2012. The space audit that I'm going to show you, I have now audited 101 libraries, mostly public, in 24 states. Last year I audited 2 libraries, the largest and smallest libraries in Anchorage, Alaska, as well as working in Florida at the same time. But my practice actually comes not from, I'm not an architect, but as a space planner comes from the private sector. And I worked for 15 years extensively with retail as a consumer brand manager. Did millions of dollars worth of research on how people move through space, why they choose to grab something or not grab something. Research is exciting as watching people brush their teeth, and ended up have applied a lot of that to this space. Because if your patrons weren't lucky enough to spend the day in a park or on a lake, or unlucky enough to spend their day at the Department of Motor Vehicles or in the penal system, if they've been in a public space, it's been at retail. That's how they learn to engage with public space. So when you do things that don't make sense from a retail standpoint, they don't understand it. And so that, a lot of what I do is that. I've also written the Public Library Association's Guide to Space Planning, and I'm working on a full-length book for ALA editions. Hopefully next year, if I get the next chapter. So I'm just going to take 2 minutes and briefly remind those of you who saw this before, and for the new trustees, to welcome you and tell you a couple of things that came out of the space audit. The whole 100 and I forget how many page thing is available to lull you to sleep at night.
There's lots of pictures.
Yeah, the pictures were great.
Yes, it's more of a picture book in the last.
Much better.
I think this whole library's renovation was premised on sort of an interesting concept that I don't think actually worked out, which was that there's sort of a symbolic journey from the dark to the light as you enter. And it sort of ended up being just a journey through the dark.
That's what it is.
And so my first concern was sort of this pathway, through the library and how to engage it and actually have patrons see something that was meaningful and valuable immediately when they came in, instead of just sort of a long hallway without any place to sit for older or mobility impaired people, without anything to see for kids, etc. You'll notice that when I was in here, for any of you new trustees, there were stacks as you came into the left. There's a teen room with quite a bit of shelving and seating, but a limited amount of seating. And then the moment you got into the back of the library here, it was a little confusing, the layout. because there's children's, but children's really presented you with a collection rather than children. And navigating it wasn't easy to figure out how to do. And then you had adult spaces back here, and and then obviously a number of excellent meeting rooms, but not clearly defined zones except for the quiet reading room here. So it was really the three things that I really thought could be done primarily with furniture that would present the greatest impact for the least amount of investment, or to improve the entry experience by adding merchandise displays, by creating a multi-use space that could allow people to have a place to sit, to meet friends coming in, teenagers later in the day, people lingering before programs in the evening. That could really be used by different groups at different times of the day. You've accomplished that already. How is the feedback then from that?
Great, yeah,
Yeah.
really great. I think still working on that merchandising piece as we come in, because we're using units that are optimized for that, but we're going to remedy that soon.
Right.
Yeah.
In terms of the cafe space, though, we do definitely see different types of people, patrons throughout the day. And we get a lot of great feedback that it's nice to have a place to land right away.
Right. Yeah. So that was the goal was really to allow you to see something active, to see people engaging with the library the moment that you walked in. And the nice thing is it didn't take huge investment; it just took some creative librarians to get
and an amazing
and
staff.
movers.
Yeah.
That's right. Movers.
And then the next thing was really to attack teens and youth. Now, teens, again, some of this has already been done, which was to the shelving in the teen room were just sort of barriers. It wasn't generating a lot of circulation. I think when you moved it, there was not really a change in circulation.
Correct.
Yeah. And the thing it was functionally doing in the teen room, it was preventing more than two groups of teens being in that space. And since you get a lot of teens in this space, it was really important to have neighborhoods in the teen room and to be able to have more teens there. And so it looks like it's working out.
That's
right?
worked.
Taking the collection out, closing the door when the teens are in the space has changed the environment dramatically over the last year.
Right.
And importantly, not just for teens, but for all the other patrons as well.
Yeah.
Because before the teens really took over in the whole place, and we had problems. So.
And all of this, I think the reason I'm talking about this before Joe shows you the plans moving forward is that these are examples of using the flexibility to respond to what patrons want to do in the space, what they're showing you that they want to do in the space. And as you redesign the space, the more of it that is flexible, the more of it that can move as patrons' behaviors change. Like if, for instance, imagine 5 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago, something happened that caused us to all sit at home for 3 or 4 months. Then our behaviors would probably change when we came out of it. We might, for instance, want to use a new kind of video conferencing software, and something that would be everywhere. And that would create the need in the library for people to use that. And we might not be equipped. We might find ourselves giving out a room that's set for 10 people to one person so they could do this kind of a call. So the more flexibility we add into the space, the more effective it will be. And that's really the point in this sort of work and study area here. What you see the 4 booths there now. And what's so fascinating to me is that you can see people sorting themselves out by their comfort with technology, their agility, their interest, but those are all people who would be taking big rooms by themselves. So even if not everybody uses it, the nice thing is the people who use it open the pathway for other people to use the spaces that are comfortable to that. So what you're going to see Joe do, I think, are really going to help you rethink the space. So as you move forward, signage is something that you'll be dealing with, but having clear, memorable, distinct signage that uses size, shape, color, font, and position to distinguish different types of messages so that the brain can tell you when you have to pay attention to a sign, just the way that it does when you're driving through, park or whatever, and you see a big red sign, you stop, say, oh, let me read that and see if that's important to me right now. As you've already moved some service points, and I think you'll feel as you get more sight lines, the staff will find it easier to serve the public. People will find somebody to help them more easily. You'll start to be able to localize noise, sort of more have an active space and have a quieter space in the library. And we're using distance a lot to achieve that. But you want to have, sort of your very quiet place where you can hear the pin drop. You want a place where people can generally be quiet, but occasionally ask a question of the staff member, et cetera, and then a place where they can actually be active. And I think you're starting to achieve that. And, having more up-to-date work services will help that as well. Okay, I'm going to leave it there because I think Joel will explain the rest of what we're doing better, and I don't want to take away from the time to actually see what you can do.
I don't know if I'm gonna be going too fast or too slow. Give me the.
So Joe, if you could first introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, yeah. Thank you. I am Joe Huberty. I'm an architect, principal with Engberg Anderson. We've had the good fortune of working on close to 400 public libraries and half a dozen academic libraries. Personally, I've been involved in 3/4 of those, and they range from 160 square feet to 160,000 square feet on the public side, and almost 500,000 on the academic side. They're all different. Every library has to be tailored to its mission, its role in the community, its resources, and the vision that the board has for serving the community. So we don't think of these as cookie cutter. We do want to acknowledge the fact that the commonality is that the buildings are there to help you serve the community and address their needs. So thinking about the way people use space is the essential part of library design. This is one of the key elements in thinking about long-term success of space. I think a lot of times people think about architecture as being glass and brick and paint and carpet, and certainly those are important in establishing identity, imagery, resonance with the community, long-term durability. But ultimately, the long-term success of a space really does depend on how it's organized in support of the delivery of service. And some of those things like putting mutually agreeable uses adjacent to one another rather than forcing an odd sort of let's put quiet reading next to the teen room. These primary relationships that are diagrammed here are critical to long-term success. And then you layer on different levels of refinement on top of that framework and develop something that will stand the test of time. So as we look at all of these, the idea was to take that as a framework and start to deliver a couple of things. Your building has a couple of strategic elements that we did want to acknowledge. Multiple points of entry, the major public zone off to the east end. The near-term recommendations were one of two sets of recommendations. We thought that both had long-term strategic value, but the near-term was easier to implement and took better advantage of the existing organization of space. So we focused on that. It doesn't preclude the other option, which was to introduce another entry. But we really wanted to make sure that this was a guide and it would help you in your long-term use of the space, but not lock you into any specific pattern. So as we go through this, I do want to point out the areas of adaptability. That notion of creating a series of events that in effect brought the library closer to the entry rather than moving the entry point closer to where the stuff already was essential. So you can see the existing entry arriving in front of the meet and greet. We wanted to acknowledge that a significant number of people go to the major event space to the left, but then the path to the right, as you've already started to transform, was an area that was underutilized. So addressing that was critical. We wanted to acknowledge that there were a few key spaces that really could animate that. The cafe, as has already been mentioned, the vault. We're suggesting that long-term, the existing makerspace is a bit small to meet the community's needs, and that space is better sized to fulfill the needs of something like this room. And so long-term, we're suggesting that this space be moved to the front, again, to be more convenient for before or after normal hours events, and to be one of those quick arrival spaces. It's also a space that could really do serve multiple purposes over the course of the day. So having it at the entry point made a lot of sense. The kinds of furniture that we're suggesting as we go through this make the service points much more engaging and friendly, less officious looking, maybe support a greater degree of approachability. These are all height adjustable elements, so in terms of universal access or ergonomics for staff, they really afford a much friendlier environment for just about anybody engaging with the desk on either side. The idea is to arrange that in position, much as you've already started, in relationship to new materials, to self-checks. The idea is that there's an intuitive way to come into the building. You don't have to cross paths between inbound people and outbound people. They each see something new and interesting and intriguing. The idea is that if you see someone who's having a little bit of trouble with things like self-service, that you're in a position to help serve them. So all that is really envisioned as happening in that marketplace cafe circulation zone. The other thing that the cafe in front did was really open up the vista into a destination type of collection. Whereas when it came right up to the front where you would have thought clear and obvious, it was just too dense. So this sort of forecourt of people space really lets you sort of get oriented, and then you see the biographies and the nonfiction. It's arranged in a way that's more inviting and takes better use of the space. It maintains some of the very interesting connections that filter their way through the study room. So you got the best of what you had, plus that ability to comprehend and engage with the space by virtue of the cafe. This is clearly a case of where fewer shelves were actually more inviting and support greater browsability, connection, and promote that discovery, discernment aspect of collection presentation. And it really did a great job of leveraging existing building form. That animated space in front, I think, can take on a lot of different characteristics. This one actually had a staff cafe, but the introduction of simple vending, the place to sit, be seen, meet people, wait for someone, just sort of enjoy the fact that you're part of a community. More and more there's an issue with people being isolated, and so the cafe environment is a great opportunity to take advantage of the services as well as to forge a greater link with your fellow citizens. Over that short distance, we want to make sure that you have line of sight to a public service point. This is that friendly, smiling face that reinforces the notion you got when you walked in, saw the people at the CERT desk. But this is the first point of real engagement with the deeper parts of the building. And it's at the crossroads. There's a lot of options that revolve around this point, and the pathways from that point want to be clear and discernible. So in the development of the plan, we were really focused on making sure that the arrows really are understood in a three-dimensional sense as people find their way through the building. And we'll walk through these spaces. But the idea is when you look at each of those labels, you can find a sense that there is a space for you in the building today with your particular needs on this visit. Again, that service point is intended to be light, height adjustable, more about engaging people than it's a place to do off-desk work or store things. This is really about, I'm here to meet you, greet you, serve you, direct you, or just let you go by if you know what you're about. So it's positioned so as not to be intimidating. The first block of space is still as it is today. It's really intended to be focused on your younger patrons. Several zones within that space. At the top, multi-purpose, we'll talk about that at length a little bit more. Really take on a little bit more of a I'm here for everyone kind of character, but one of its uses could definitely be focused on younger patrons. Active learning is definitely geared towards hands-on, social, interactive learning. And then the forecourt to that is really the print materials, but arranged in a much more engaging arrangement with more people space arranged around it and through it. The notion is that to get to some of the major destinations like active learning, you pass by some of the print materials and are exposed to curated collections. And so your journey in and your journey out are filled with temptations to grab materials. That destination space of the interactives could be small scale, medium scale, very large scale, and interspersed with opportunities to sit with a sibling, a friend, a parent, a caregiver. One of the things that we've learned with all of these is that you need as much space for people watching as you do for people engaging in the interactives. So there's a wide range of opportunities available in that interactives, and in some ways it spills in and out across that barrier. And the thought is you can really create an environment within that space, or let that same kind of character, lively, animated without being obtrusive, spill out into the building. Here you see floating at the top of the screen some acoustically absorbent clouds that might be necessary given the level of activity we would anticipate in the space. You also see the introduction of something other than carpet as a flooring material. So a lot of different scales. That was very large. These are smaller scale spaces that we would imagine. On the left is a low sensory space. It's actually LED lighting that runs the spectrum of potential lighting, so you can adjust it based on individual needs. Something built into the thickness of an artificially deep wall. These work out great. They're almost like picnic tables in a park. This is where families would camp out. This is where middle schoolers love to do homework. It's a place to sort of hang out and have your own space, but be seen and sort of not get away with too much. And that's kind of the character we were envisioning for that middle school wall that we call it. And then opportunities to introduce crafts, very focused activity spaces. Some of this you've already all got in the vault. This is also some of the character we would propose for the multi-purpose room at the far end of children's. So it's got a series of medium, small, and very large scale spaces. The second group of space is really geared towards teens and adult, and it's collection in some ways. Collection as you know it, collection as you're experimenting with it. The foreground elements, marketplace, graphic novels, media, are a low series of shelves that lead back towards the taller stacks, Spanish, young adult, fiction. We've got another marketplace in the back with specialized genre collections. Part of that is to act as destinations to pull people deeper into the building because they're seeking those materials. And part of it is to arrange collections to define certain zones of people space. So for example, on the genre collection, you can see the upper left, one type of environment, to the lower right, another type of environment. And it creates those pockets of space that really let people find the kind of, what do you call it, David, the vibe that you're looking for in your particular neighborhood. That could be function, that could be personal preference, that could be time of day. And so the idea is that those different spaces take on different characteristics and they nest with people's preferences or functional requirements. And we'll get into some of those as we go through this in more detail. But the idea is that it is an undifferentiated space. There is character imbued throughout, but there's connectivity because all of the elements along the pathway along the study rooms are very low, and when you turn the corner at that first public service point, you can see all the way to the back of the building. Whether it's seating, stacks, another public service point farther back, the computers, or the tables and chairs, you can see all the way back to the quiet reading room. We think that's important to make sure that people have some sense of overall organization and don't feel intimidated by what is a fairly large building. The environments are created for the most part by furnishings, tables, chairs, you're familiar with them. We're suggesting updated versions of both, more enclosed venues for 1, 2, 4 individuals that allow you different degrees of separation, ability to focus. We want to arrange these in layers so that the taller, more enclosed ones aren't overly private and don't block views out the windows. There's some very nice space to look out into along the perimeter of the building. Flexible, so you can pull up your own device, maybe even something as archaic as a notepad. But the different types of seating really don't force you into a one-size-fits-no-one approach to seating. And then some of the experiments you've already started conducting. The pillar, hugely successful in a lot of libraries. I think, Ryan, you're seeing some of the same kind of interest from the public in your building. Yeah. And then versions of that step down from that level of enclosure to something that's 3/4 enclosed, like the Brody, to something that's maybe half enclosed, as in the upper left. Again, between that and the traditional open seating styles, there is a place for people within the building. Updating the technology, a little bit more space to spread out when you're using the library's provided PCs, scanners, enough room for multiple monitors. You're doing something that requires that type of screen space. There's an opportunity to do things that you couldn't do on most of the laptop handheld kind of devices. So the concept is to be supportive of the full range of technology. A couple of more enclosed spaces. One of the big moves was to relocate Maker deeper into the building, into the flex room, and then to build a really acoustically separating wall between it and the existing quiet reading room. Quiet reading, we're really imagining staying pretty much as is. And then to expand the existing small multi-purpose room into something that's significantly larger. We've got some blow-ups of that later. So while there's a variety of spaces that are out in the open and defined by furniture, we're thinking that there are instances where physical enclosure by means of walls and doors is essential to promoting the types of services that you want to provide to the public. And that multi-purpose room, again, very flexible, lots of storage, everything's on wheels, you move it around. These spaces aren't intended to be precious, they're intended to be cleanable. So if you want to brew, disassemble an engine, whatever it happens to be, these are the spaces to do that. Depending on the focus, be it digital or more crafty, hands-on, easy access to power, access to water, things of that nature. So the character of the space can really suggest the level of use and the range of opportunities there. So again, a fair amount of discussion went into establishing the furnishings types. And then we got into more minor modifications. The four-person cluster in the middle is really the subdivision of your existing larger conference room. I think it's room 3. The use pattern seems to suggest that four-person size is the most in demand. And by virtue of relocating this room to the front, we've provided a space that can be used by larger groups. And the use of the flex space for the maker space in combination with these four-person rooms gave you that layering of room sizes that would be essential. And then there's another public service point deeper in the building, partly to provide assistance for the computing, partly to control the study rooms, partly to keep an eye on the back part of the building. Any questions to this point? It's all making sense? Good. You know we're in the middle of initial tests. Everybody wants to poke at some of these concepts to make sure that they are sound. And these initial ideas do seem to be testing out well. So you've started on the cafe, the reconfiguration of nonfiction, purchases of some of the opto merchandising systems, the pillars. So the areas in blue, I think, are part of these initial tests that are either in progress or about to be in progress within the next month or two. It's indicative of the overall strategy for the master plan. You could literally buy this one piece of furniture at a time and implement it over 1,000 years, or gang it together into bigger chunks. But the idea is to make sure that there's an overall structure within which you're working to accomplish the bigger picture goals. That's important in terms of that incremental implementation. Our thought is that these initial tests are really setting you up for, whenever it happens, a larger renovation of these spaces. So for example, the new display elements in the lobby are step 1, but getting rid of that maroon ceiling tile might be step 2. When we talk about lighter and brighter, there's a series of elements, some of which are light, some of which are finishes, some of which is the stuff actually on display. So you don't have to do it all at once, but the things that are part of step 1 are supportive of step 2 and 3. So when it comes to step 3, you don't have to undo step 1. And so a lot of this is just making sure that that path forward is there. Part of that effort has been to think about, when you're buying something, what's it made out of? What color is it? What material? How does it adapt to what you've got now? Do you like what you've got now? Is it going to change? How might it fit with that? So in discussions with people, the character of the building, the setting, the sort of sensibilities about the character of the community, its place in the world, how might we develop a palette that made some sense? And the initial furniture selections have really been in the fairly neutral range, more of a silver colored metal and a light colored wood, being pretty universally applicable to both existing and anticipated future. But the sense of the building being a lively space, and being a very large volume. We're not suggesting to repaint the ceiling or anything, but it's a big volume. It can support a lot of color. If you go in fairly light neutral, it shows a lot of dirt and it gets washed out in a lot of the sort of light filled volumes that you've got. So fairly intense, and we've selected in this case things that evoke kind of a biophilic character to them. So some sort of harmony with the natural world inside the building. It almost does feel like an outdoor space with just a roof, given the amount of light in it. So the continuation of that notion of multiple paths forward is to think about what it might cost to implement everything, and then talk about how do we work towards this if we're not going to pony up, in this case, $5.3 million. We started to look at this in terms of two major groups, the things that were primarily furniture and finish focused, and the things that really required major construction. I'm not talking major construction in terms of an addition. It's more, we got to build a few walls. And in some cases, we're rebuilding a restroom or two. So those are in the lower group, construction focused projects. The upper group is really about carpet, a few lighting changes, and mostly furniture. Recognizing that $3.2 million is still a significant amount of money, we started to think about ways to break that down into a series of stepped improvements. And we thought about organizing this into 3 years of potential investment. Getting started was really to focus on kids. The notion that it gets a lot of users sort of hooked on library service early. It's an important part of their development in many ways. And it was an easily identifiable zone within the building that sets the tone. It's one of the first spaces you encounter. So getting that right would adjust some of the issues of spaces deeper in the building, but it really sets the stage. Broader impact takes that notion and says we really have to do something for the full range of our patrons, and suggests that the furniture improvements in adults and teens should be added to the mix. And then longer term acknowledges that our basic youth services upgrade doesn't do everything that's included in the master plan. And there was a sense that, boy, if you're going to touch the space, maybe you ought to just get it all done and not come back 5, 6, 7 years from now to have 2 different layers of development within that space. Run the risk of something that looks 7 years old being adjacent to something new. And the idea was to add all of the power data, acoustic treatments, new construction that the full youth services renovation contemplates. So there's a lot of implied questions in all of that. But the idea was to try and identify 3 levels of investment that made some sense. This is where it gets multi-layered. Within that, the basic youth services upgrade to the full youth services upgrade is a range of steps. Below basic was minimum. We went through that. There's a basic level that we'll talk through, and then full services upgrade. Want to make sure everyone knows what's in that. So in thinking about the long-term plan, we wanted to make sure that that second round of projects, the ones where we're actually building new walls, where area 1 is, that we didn't do anything that would foreclose on those options. The rest of it is really focused on how you look at 2, 3, and 4 and move the things that are in Coco's Cove out so that you can renovate Coco's Cove and have both sides of that wall make some sense. So that's the active part of this initial study. Our longer term, the part that is not part of this pricing, anticipates taking apart the existing staff workroom block, moving those functions into the primary staff work zone behind the circ desk, and turning this part of the building over to the public. That, in addition to the existing multi-purpose space up by the number 2, becomes the backbone for a larger multi-purpose space that opens on to renovated Coco's Cove and to the adult services side of the building, and institutes a series of storage strategies that support transformation of that room into just about anything you could possibly imagine it wanting to be. There's enough storage space here to take those tables out entirely and basically have an empty room. You want to have yoga, defense class, what kind?
Story time.
Yeah, everyone's sitting on their butts. That kind of space, space for craft storage. So the idea is that it really becomes a larger venue that is supportive of activities for adults, teens, and kids. Depending on which way you enter, it feels like a space dedicated to you. Introduced a family restroom, a mother's room, and a common room in that space. And so the space that's currently given over to staff really becomes a pretty significant public service set of spaces. The pillars are relocated, and we get a nook for graphic novels or some other featured environment. All in the future, we want to make sure that the geometries that are established near term, we're protecting this long-term opportunity. And then we turned our attention to the existing proposal. There's a couple of spaces, one of which when you arrive in the kids, it'd be nice to see featured collections and people. So number 1 and number 7 are significant departure from the it's just stacks kind of arrangement. 1 is really a marketplace for kids. 7 is a place for people to spend some time together. So it's got the iPad table, any of those other kinds of elements, places to curl up. The lounge chairs are intended to be overscaled so you can curl up with a child. The pathway through the marketplace leads to what we're envisioning as an older kids zone. We call it the middle school zone, but that's with the seats built into the thickness of the wall, a new wall. And then the point is reimagined as something that's a little bit more social, still a featured destination, but something that has more of a let's do things as small groups of people. And then number 3, picture books. And then in between all of that, 2 and 5 are fiction and nonfiction collections, respectively. We've got some variations on this over time that suggest that the balance between what's on traditional shelving and on the Opto merchandising shelving will shift as people become accustomed to you're promoting more curated displays of collections. So the exact boundaries between what's Opto and what's traditional shelving, that's going to evolve over time. The idea is that the initial concept gives you the room for people to learn the new style, still maintain your current collection capacity, but really increase circulation based on greater display. When we add all that up and think about introducing the interactives that are in Coco's Cove, step 3, we come up with an entry-level price tag of about $500,000. In theory, it's possible to do this in smaller steps for less money, but when we looked at it in practical terms, as I mentioned earlier, moving the elements that are in Coco's Cove out really necessitates reorganizing zones 1 and 2, and by extension 4. So we're really buying the moving relocation of those elements before we can implement the improvements in Coco's Cove. And if we're going to do Coco's Cove, it makes sense to do the flooring in there as well. So we're really thinking about touching most of the existing youth services zone as part of a pragmatic, people are going to be impressed, it's going to look like it's done kind of step 1. It won't be entirely done if the entire master plan is implemented, and we'll talk through some of that in a minute. But that's the entry level. We think the next step up, and this is the one we've included in the cost models at the end, is to not only do the flooring in Coco's Cove, but to do the flooring in the rest of the building. It is nearing the end of its life. It's not in horrible condition, but it is starting to show signs of wear and tear. It could be, you could get another 3-5 years out of it, tops, but at that point, you'd be moving everything you just put down to recarpet the space and then resetting it back up, and that seems like a bit of a waste. And this is your opportunity to really establish the character of the space by doing it all. Also included in the extra $600,000 is more furniture. The point would be done, and then we'd be looking at improving some of the acoustics in the space as well, hanging some of those clouds. If we're going to do everything to the full extent, we think it's $1 million all in. So we're painting every surface, we're putting a lot of acoustics in, we're putting much more power and data into the floor. We're building that middle school wall. That was not part of this version. It's just some tables and chairs along the edge. But this building the wall, that involves a lot of power, data, fire protection, HVAC, and then general improvements to area C. And when we think through that, that's a series of component costs that really add up. This is the scenario that says you're done, and you don't have to think about this space again for quite some time, other than, yeah, I want to shout some of these tables around or introduce more opto. This concept is pretty well built out. So those are the three versions we looked at, and in our longer term strategies, we're recommending that this middle one is a place to start. If you need to focus on a lower cost set of options, that's possible. And in the let's go all in, we've included tier 3 as a possibility. When we talk about adult and teens, it's thinking about all the furniture. And again, I want to highlight the things that we're protecting long term, but aren't doing as part of this first step. This room being transformed into a staff space to support the maker room isn't done. We are not subdividing study room 3, and we are not building the new multi-purpose room where the current children's staff is located. So those stay as is, and you can see that configuration shown as a base plan here. Conference room is still in place. The flex is still in place. The staff office is still in place. What we would be proposing is to buy the new shelving and the seating that's highlighted in blue and reconfiguring the adjacent spaces that are unhighlighted. This is on top of some of the near-term purchases that you're contemplating for August and September. So the marketplace in front is done. Some of the display shelving along in front of the study rooms is done. We've relocated them in this diagram. But we're really purchasing items shown in blue. And this is what we're including in both tier 2 and tier 3 cost models. And that's close to $400,000.
Yeah, and if I can add to the rationale here is that this doesn't give you all of the functionality of the final plan, but this is going to create the ability to do kinds of work that are hard to do now in the library. It'll increase circulation beyond what you have now, and it will also feel like, we've done this in a few other libraries where we've spent intermediate amounts of money on furniture, and it will feel like a renovation to adults as well as for children. So I think that gives you a broader win than just touching the children's space.
Right. So when you go back to those 3 basic levels that we identified early, just do kids at the basic level, not the minimal level. The broad impact, which is what David is talking about, close to $990,000, and the longer term, do kids all the way, and then that next layer of development for adults and teens, we're at basically $1.4 million. As I pointed out, portions are possible, but from a strategic have an impact. We think these are the steps that make some sense in terms of the practicalities of investment, construction, and overall organization. So it feels like an initial step. So that's kind of the framework of the master plan.
And I know the board, when we talked about this, you're looking for 3 tiers at $250,000 and then $750,000. And you still could go with those tiers, but logically, it kind of makes sense to go with one of these options. So you could, spend $250,000 in like just adult and teen furniture, but it's just kind of a
$250,000 is going to feel very unfinished.
Yes, exactly. So you could do that. And so if you're thinking, Ryan, you didn't give us that option. Well, that option is still on the table. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense after we talked about it.
And then kind of a question in my head was, you said that was if we went with something that was not the full, the other parts of it, how much life is left in those parts where we would have to replace or upgrade them soon. Yeah. And how much longer before we would have to, flip it again.
Are you asking like the longevity of this plan in terms of
if we went with a lower plan, the longevity of the stuff that we didn't improve?
Oh, okay.
Some of that comes down to how you measure longevity in terms of, is it worn out? Things like steel shelving last forever. So some of it is how are you using it, how are you spacing it, what about the lighting, those kinds of things. Other things like some of your furnishings, I would suggest that they've been used up both in terms of functionality, comfort, and utility for today's current library user. They aren't falling apart, mostly. Some of them are a little spongy. So depending on how you measure that, for the most part, I think one of our primary concerns is that a lot of the things in the building don't fit current use patterns. Most of that is the item itself. Some of it is how it's arranged. And the idea is that some of the steel shelving just should leave the building in favor of things like the display shelving. The others, where it really is about providing that reservoir to pull materials out to the displays, that, we're showing reusing some of that because it has capacity, has structural integrity.
When you think about the way this is going to change the children's experience, immediately as you start to turn the corner, you were greeted with basically the children's collection, right? And that was the representation. Now you actually are going to see kids and parents, and you're going to see merchandise displays, so something to draw you through. I think the difference between that middle plan and doing it full is that you can really be done with this space. You have to decide budgetarily, can we do it or not? I think if you could afford it, it would be worth just being able to now focus on the rest of the building and build your plans sort of over time. What we're trying to do is take a $5 million budget and figure out what parts of it are going to have the greatest impact in the shortest amount of time for you. And but all I would say is that you obviously want to be fiscally responsible to your community, but like I'm a trustee in Westchester County in New York, and what we look at is how can we deploy the maximum amount of our funding while keeping the responsible amount. Because if we're not deploying it, that's also not serving the community. So I can't tell you what that is. I can tell you that I think the plans that Joe has put together are very responsible in terms of trying to give you active elements that can be effective.
So I'm looking at our budget proposal from this year, which I see you have in front of you too.
No, yeah, I mean, George, what I did, I'm gonna let you answer your question, but, so when I saw these 3 tiers, I did 3 different versions of the.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah. So we'll pass these out. So this would be, make sure I'm getting these right. The first, oh yeah, of course. This is the first tier. This is the getting started basic youth upgrade. The first paper I'm giving you. So the second tier would be the broad impact. I'm sorry for the small print on these. I know it's small, but data. And then the third tier is that longer term.
That's first.
Oh, I think they're both coming to me.
Okay,
at the
then
same
if there's
time.
an extra,
Let me just make sure these are the same.
if there's an extra, yeah?
First year. Okay, these are extra.
Yeah, there's extras coming your way.
So not only did I bring this extra broad.
This is
Second tier.
Weideberg with me to the meeting. Our
Wait, yeah, we both have
You
second.
both have second
budget
tier.
community residents here. So,
Okay, so this is second tier, sorry.
Here's
And
third
then
tier.
third tier.
yeah. So you can see in small print it says first year, second year,
Yeah,
third
I
year.
just,
So
sorry, yeah.
remember what per policy, the big thing I look at is that percentage of yearly expenditure available. Obviously, we want to be as close to 100% as possible in a perfect world, but our policy says 50 to 100%. So if you were to go with the third tier, remember this is a pretty conservative projection. Historically, anytime we do this, we always end up better the next year. I mean, that's a track record. If you look at the third tier, worst case scenario. For these projections, which could change, FY 30-31, 64% of yearly expenditures available, and that's the same year that debt service comes off the books. So you're going to start to quickly replenish the special reserve fund, as you can see.
Can you repeat the first line? 50 to 100%. What did you say?
Yeah, per our policy, we want to have 50, 100% of our yearly expenditure available.
Okay.
So how much we, average spend per year.
Yeah.
So, looking at this, my personal opinion is I think we can afford to do all three. So you take your pick. You can ask Doug I think Doug, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he's
He's looked it over.
yeah, so.
Doug, if you could tell us, impact-wise, I mean, obviously the largest expenditures we've had in the last 5 years were the parking lot and the HVAC project.
Right.
And those both came out to roughly $1.5 million apiece. Obviously, neither plan 2 nor 3 leaves us that much. Probability, what do we have as a likelihood of something like that hitting within the next 3 years?
Yeah.
It's pretty low that we'd actually have an emergency where we need to pull that kind of money out, if I believe I'm understanding the question correctly.
That is my question.
So Doug, what happens if that asteroid hits the building? Seriously, what happens?
We
Insurance, yeah.
relocate.
Relocate.
Have we
Find a
survived?
Because I think that's one thing that I know that obviously you want to have money on hand for any emergencies, but one thing, if there was like a catastrophic event, let's say there's a record flood and the building is flooded, we do have insurance, so those kinds of things are covered. Obviously, something like we need to replace the membrane roof a couple years early. Well, that would be insurance. That's like FY 2030, 2031. So, if we had to move that project up a couple of years, yes, it would take a chunk out of special reserve, but we'd still have funds available. So,
What was our last estimate on the membrane roof?
yeah,
I know it's on our capital plan.
Well, that's 2030, 31. You can see it's 1 point. That's a big chunk of whatever is in facilities for that year. So there was quite a bit of it.
The roof is, okay, I was gonna ask about that, yeah. All right.
That's really my only concern with option 3.
The roof or just having?
The roof or any other
catastrophic thing.
Well, catastrophic we can handle.
Right.
It's
It's a
the
boiler going off.
non-insurance covered
Right,
problems that are
yeah.
Our boiler's in good shape, our air conditioning systems are good, the building electrical system, well, it's another story, but it's good enough.
What about
It'll never
what
be
if-
enough for you.
what about on the system side?
Which systems?
What do you mean by
Like
that?
I mean,
information
like,
systems,
yeah,
like technology
IT.
systems?
Those we maintain regularly and they are more or less up to date. I don't anticipate any big issues there. It's doable. It's a lot, but it's doable.
Well, and it makes me feel better to know that our debt service would be done, so that we'd go back up into 70%, the next year after that.
And it does make more sense to do this in one shot. if
I
possible.
agree.
And it will only get more expensive as you push it out.
More than likely.
Fair enough.
George, can I interject?
Please.
So currently in our budget, we have about $1 million in the budget for the space planning.
Okay.
And that leaves us with an estimated at the end of the year of 1.4 million in special reserves. We generally are per year transferring about $500,000 from the corporate into special reserves. So if you went with the highest tier, 1.4 million, you basically have estimated to have about 1.4 million at the end of next fiscal year of fund balance and special reserve.
I think that's doable, actually. It's tight, but it's doable. Tell me if I'm wrong, please.
I think it's definitely doable if you want to do it.
And this is, like I said, and I think the reason we come out ahead each year, we redo this plan is because we're very conservative with our assumptions here. So in terms of what we roll in, like I think, I don't remember tonight, what do we assume you roll in each year? Special reserve? Lower than we historically do anyway, so.
Yeah.
And doing all of it would be potentially less disruptive than doing it in the pieces and having to move things around by a lot in time, right?
Yep.
Is it a good assumption?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think,
I-
except for,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Except for long term, when we have to, if we wanna build the walls and all that, but for right now, yeah, it makes more sense.
Well, the other thing about doing it and having the biggest impact is that helps our case in terms of some kind of capital fundraising campaign, capital campaign,
absolutely.
because
Oh, yeah.
it's very clear looking at this plan, we definitely don't have the money to do the rest of this plan. I mean, that's very clear. So we're gonna have to
Come up with.
write
capital
grants. We're gonna have
Yeah.
to, ask for money. We're gonna have to raise funds. So this is gonna help us sell that.
Well,
that we've
I
like
was
look
just
at what
gonna
we've
say,
done
yep.
now. If you give us more, we can do this.
We also have potential fundraising opportunities around the interactives in Coco's Cove. Those are large objects that you can easily slap somebody's name on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Can we look at the slide again, just the visual representation of number 3, please?
The longer term.
Let me have to go back. This one?
Yeah.
And Lauren, do you have specific questions about what you're seeing here?
No, I just wanted to just to see it again.
Again, yeah.
Do you mind talking through this again,
Sure.
please?
Yeah, 2 major zones, Coco's Cove, being the interactives, is really envisioned as a series of hands-on environments, ranging from 1 to a small group, 7 or 8 children interacting with something. Usually it's intended as a series of layers of involvement, the person actually engaging in it, and then children watching those children
Right.
as they're engaging with it, and then caregivers, parents, keeping an eye on the kids, but exchanging stories about what it's like to be a parent or a caregiver in kind of contemporary society.
Right.
So, and then scattered amongst them, siblings, people curled up, just enjoying the room. It ranges from kind of a baby garden, which is what we're showing at the top right, a simple enclosure where you sit on a bench that gives space for people to crawl around, to the object in the middle is envisioned as something that is 3-dimensional, that you can climb on, that has enough of an enclosure so that you can be in it, you can be in front of it. A lot of times we use it as a background for a stage. Sometimes one of the walls becomes a puppet theater. Sometimes the elements underneath the upper level are about storing things like costumes. Usually it's built out of something where you can change the facade. Sometimes, it can be, this year it's a barn, next year it's a rocket ship,
Right.
Next year it's a submarine. And in some instances, it's been library produced art within the building that becomes the cladding for that structure.
I think the director always does all the art.
More trouble. Right, Chip Van Nail gun.
We used to have an art committee. We can start one again.
And then it ranges from total imagination to emulation of adult activity, real play. So mini supermarket, mini auto repair, mini laboratory. So a variety of that interaction, social learning Yes.
Sort of like itty bitty children's museum.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say a number of staff have been looking at other libraries, and we've all fallen in love with the art space at the Kenosha Children's
Oh,
Oh,
Library.
it's awesome.
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's amazing.
So when we're thinking of interactive space, that could include an art.
it could easily, right. Especially the way the room is configured, there's alcoves as well as a central space where each arm of that could take on something of a character.
And there's a lot of money out there for making practical art spaces in public places. Cool.
For like the lab space too, though, we've got Abbott and Happy
Yeah.
in the area. We could get to sponsor those. Maybe.
Yeah.
Outside of the space, picture books, juvenile fiction, nonfiction, and then lots of display, and then different zones for people. David mentioned that initial space that really announces, hey, it is a place for people.
Right.
Come and gather. Trying to create, again, that variety where you can sit as a pair, you can sit as a little group of friends. Hopefully it takes on meaningful, attractive character for different ages over the course of a day. You could imagine toddlers in the morning, middle schoolers in the afternoon, serious, a little bit of homeworking kind of in the evenings. You can find that kind of environment where maybe you're here just to socialize, maybe you're here to unwind from a long day at school, maybe you're here because it's story time and you live for story time. But there's a place to sit, lots of places for people to actually sit rather than just wander the aisles.
Right.
There's still a purpose in wandering the aisles, and we're supporting that effort more with more of the face out merchandising of the collections. So more and more of the space is given over to something that is less about storage and more about tempting someone to pick something up.
Can you talk a little bit about the level 3, the completion, what elements that adds to this?
Yeah. So in level 3, we gave up on the it's only furniture kind of notion. So the thick wall gets built in that notion. We're also suggesting that that's the time to, or level of investment to paint everything again, to look at things that might get a lot of impact. Have we got enough power? Have we got power in the right places? We're assuming that a lot of the data is going to be wireless, so it's mostly tuning the wireless transponders, making sure that that's all right. We are a little concerned about acoustics. So even though the library has really worked towards moving some activities into the vault, and that by virtue in the future of developing that multi-purpose room, by the introduction of things like Pillar, we're giving people opportunities to do some more of the noisy stuff. But whatever's going out in Zone C is going to generate some noise. So maybe there's a need for those acoustic clouds. We put a lot of money into, hey, you're going to need acoustic clouds into that level 3 level of development in this. There's always something that comes up, so I got a slush fund in there.
Well, that's, I think those are some of the things that are in my head, like the need for the acoustic clouds and like the wall build out. Like some of those things are the things that I'm wondering. Like, what's the level of need?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
The key thing is going to be that when we do, the ALA estimates that when we do a renovation on the space, we increase traffic by 150%. So you're going to get more people in the space. So where you have disruption now, you've somewhat moved the you relocated the disruption by trying to enclose it. You're not going to be able to do that now, right? Because
Right.
now that's an interactive area, right? And if you think about the number of kids who would be there if you moved them today, that number is going to significantly increase. So I think the concern is that you don't, the one risk we have with the middle plan is that you could become a victim of your own success. You're going to create a level of activity and noise that could be, you could hear through Cocos Cove, and also that's going to transmit. Now, there's nothing perfect even about this final plan, that it will do some things to dampen it. Am I speaking?
Would that solid wall also be acoustically absorbing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hesitate to call anything that we ever show you the final plan until someone's swinging a hammer. There is plenty of room for refinement here. One of the notions behind something like the thick wall, although it does cost a lot of money, and there are different ways to accomplish, we need a seating zone for middle schoolers. This is the one that's proven to be most successful based on how many people you see sitting in these kinds of things compared to just tables and chairs kind of arranged along a wall, no matter how nice the tables and chairs are. It's a step up from a booth, but we could do more booth-like things, save some money. It's not as private, not as acoustically separate, not as, the cool factor isn't as powerful.
That's kind of where my head is, like, is there an in between,
Yeah.
like a happy medium between the fullest, I mean, I know this isn't the
Yeah.
full thing, but you know, like having the best acoustic possibility and, you know what I mean, just like almost a play as you go type of situation, like,
Here's the way to think of it.
do we have to commit to the
Right.
fullest package and the best wall, or can we like,
I think you're committing to it by doing any of this. The question is just when you spend the money, right? If you want to get this number of people into that space and make this as effective as you want, you're going to need to do these things eventually.
Okay.
But it's okay if you put them off if it's not achievable now. What I don't think, I think that I'm not the architect, he's the architect, right? You've hired the architect and you should trust the architect to believe that he's trying to make those like cost versus effectiveness things on your behalf. Now you can guide him and pressure him more, but that's sort of what's been happening already. It's sort of saying like, yeah, every piece of glass in this building could be double paned air gap glass, and you really wouldn't hear anything. That would cost a lot more money, right? So this is already some of what you're talking
trying
about.
to be a
rational,
conservative,
but
right?
It's already
right.
trying to do that.
Ryan, can you go back to the slide where we show those middle schooler sections? Because I did actually like those when I saw them. I wanted to confirm.
And can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Is that whole
we talked
area
about
that we were just
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
sure.
going to not be carpet?
I would think that Coco's Cove would not be. I would
Okay.
think that the area outside
Outside could
very
be,
easily,
Okay.
yeah.
I was thinking that too.
yeah, and still use the acoustic
So
tiles.
Yeah.
if we were to have, you know, a non-carpeted floor,
And
so it's
that's-
not absorbing sound, are the
Yes.
clouds gonna be enough to absorb what's going up?
Not likely. That's
So
one of the
would
big
it be
advantages
better
of-
to have a full
Well, that's why.
absorbance?
That would be
ceiling?
problematic with your
Yeah.
overall building. You get a lot of light through that, and some of
You
the
don't
character is
That
that
would cut
light.
off the skylights, exactly.
We could be putting something acoustic up against the deck, suspending something, let sound hit it and be absorbed by it, and when it reflects off the deck, it comes back and hits it on the top side, so you're getting a lot of extra utility out of a certain amount of surface area.
Okay.
So it's pretty powerful. But we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't undermine the sort of spirit and the impact of
Of the
that
building
volume.
itself.
'Cause we're talking about something like this green thing.
Correct,
Yeah.
right.
In the thick wall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, knowing middle schoolers, and I have a middle schooler. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
you need something. You need a middle school containment unit.
Yeah.
Containment.
That's what we'll call it. We'll paint that on the.
Watch it.
They'll have a railroad car on the
You just pull
side.
the thing in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sharp drop
The
down.
cone of silence.
The cone of silence, yeah.
I mean, technically, right now, we have the vault area designated for middle schoolers
Right.
too, but I can tell you, especially the younger middle schoolers, even though they're just as loud as the teens.
They're probably
Are
more-
Oh,
intimidated
no,
by
they're
the
worse.
middle
Yeah,
schoolers.
oh, I was just
Yeah,
As a
saying.
they're
middle
worse.
school teacher, they're the worst.
Yes, yeah, I agree
The
with you
volume
very much,
is-
Carolyn.
They need a different zone.
Yeah,
And they would think that was really
Yeah.
cool.
they would
So-
think it was really
My-
cool.
I guess I'm having a hard time envisioning this. This is going to be
Along that wall.
along the wall.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you go back to that other,
Where JS
Oh, the
Benyon
plan.
currently is.
right, just
Where
to
what?
show
JS
the,
Benyon currently is.
or what?
Where the JS Benyon collection is currently. That's where
Yeah.
it says
Okay.
that we're talking
Okay.
about.
So along the bottom edge, we're showing it as being
Yeah,
deep
see
enough
at the
for-
bottom right there,
Right, along the vault.
the picnic tables.
Yeah.
and the
So
cone of
in the
silence.
Especially
kids
the outer wall
section where
area.
you have
Outer
like.
wall.
the
So is it just
poten-
open then? That's what I'm confused about. Like if it was that green booth, it's going to be the back side of that along the wall
Right,
and the open facing out. What's the wall that we're
We're
talking about?
building a new wall in front of your existing wall, so
So,
that we can
with the
carve
depth.
in.
for the depth.
Okay.
So that's basically have a sprinkler head.
And that's like necessary? You can't just put that on the wall?
Not like there's no room.
Well, you can put booths there.
You can
for
put
sure.
Yeah, you
booths
could put
there,
the
But there'll be a
booths.
different,
But
again,
the
it's
intent
different,
here is they can be a
different
little bit
sound
louder.
implications, it has.
This will contain it a little
Yeah.
bit more.
It's not quite as attractive, I mean, it's sort
Right.
of, there's intermediate measures for sure, that's what we have in the middle plan essentially.
Okay. Because I think we all agree that those are great. Like, I'm just wondering, like, is that sufficient? You know, does it have to go to the next step of walls and like, and committing to that, right? You know,
The
I
booths
I don't
don't give you a lot of separation
Yeah.
at all.
What do you
They're a
mean,
place to sit, but that's all.
the
They don't-
booths, what do you mean by that?
Just having, you know, basically
Oh, yeah,
booth
yeah, yeah,
seating.
gotcha.
Center booth,
Yeah,
I
they
just,
won't give you much.
So just also from having my own children and being middle school special ed, like for the little guys, there's a lot of multimodal things to play with or interest them. Is that something that could spill over into like the middle school teens? Cause they need that as well. And the different kinds of seating and things to
engage them.
engage.
right, not just a whole wall of
Right,
booths,
not
is
just
that what you're saying?
reading,
Yeah.
like they need other things.
Well, if you look at the point,
Yeah.
that becomes, it feeds into this area. So there is some potential right there for that to be more of the interactive zone for families and or
Yeah.
Well, guys, the other thing just to remember is that this is not the design phase for this, this is a master plan. So
That's
what
true,
we're trying
that's
to do
true.
is to figure out the appropriate budget and give you an idea, but if it turns out that you want to, I totally agree with you, and I also have a middle schooler, and I totally agree with you on middle school. And I like the idea of looking at the point area there and, you know, and doing some kind of other interactive for older kids. I think that makes a ton of sense. This gives you the flexibility to do
Like a
that.
gaming room.
We've got the
And
gaming
gaming
tables,
room.
we've got the gaming PC out there, gaming TV.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I think that just that statement helped me because I'm getting caught up in specific design details, and that's not really exactly what we're talking about, right?
What's the, can I ask a question, the time frame for
Yeah,
this, you know?
depends on the scheme
how
you
does
pick.
it-
For tier 3, the big one.
Tier 3 takes a little bit longer,
Yeah.
tier
Like 6
1
months.
goes pretty quickly.
So,
How long do you think for tier 3 it would be from, they say go till it's constructed and done?
Constructed, harder to say, 2 to 3 months before you order, and then it's lead time on the furniture, and then install. Anytime with flooring, most of the flooring is fairly commodity based.
But even for the big plan by like next summer?
Oh, yeah.
So I have concerns about the tariffs and things like that. If we, I mean, how that might impact our
Yeah.
total here and how, if we take longer and longer to decide, I'm just,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
How
I
much
saw
more are we
some
gonna look
asterisks
at?
about
Yeah.
supply chain, you know, not
Yeah,
Telling Ryan and David, we got 2 notices of cost increases
Oh.
today from the same manufacturer, like 90 minutes apart.
Yep.
Our previous notice wasn't enough, we're increasing it again.
yeah.
I have a budget question. So on the third tier, so the projected budget's basically 9 million. Does that include the capital projects that are already planned? You know, the building improvements and the technology upgrades, the meeting room may be refurbishment. So that's everything
included
we've
in that,
spoken about before is
in there.
That
included
is
in
correct.
addition to
Yes.
this. Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
It's all in there.
Yeah, it's 1.9, not 9 million, 1.9.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
nine
I
million.
understood. where
Sorry,
you were.
yeah,
No,
I was looking at one
I was
line
looking at your
and-
finger where you were
Yeah.
pointing and I.
What are the thoughts around the table? Bonnie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think as long as financially, we're looking at enough going forward, and also in case we have any catastrophic something that's not included in insurance. And I think also, when you see we've been to, I mean, I've been doing library searches myself, and you go in and the children's section is the place where it's va va voom. That's,
Yeah.
that's where you
That's
see
the bang for the
color,
buck, for
and,
sure.
and we have lots of young families, and I just think that is the big draw. If we get that done, then we could maybe get people to donate more money for other things.
Well, that,
I mean, it's just
and
the
I can
powerful
tell you
piece.
as a stay-at-home parent, I was at the library
Oh,
way more
same,
than I was
same.
now.
That's the
Um,
hook.
If you
I
are
feel
ever
like,
here
is
and you
that,
see
like,
all
if
the
you can
families
bring in
coming
young
children's
families and
programming
then
and young families.
then that kind of creates a lifelong library
Yes.
Well,
patron.
and the other
hopefully.
piece is that's what the cafe has done when I've been here. I was here during finals week, and there were adults there, there were kids there. I've seen moms stop there and put coats on. It's just the best. Hello, this is the library, you know, and you don't have to find a book to right now, but I just thought that was a great idea. I really like that.
Wendy,
Yeah,
which
the
of these
cafe.
plans is speaking to you?
She's the treasurer, so
Yeah, exactly.
she does a lot more.
And Andrea's voice is echoing in my head, so.
Like, we can't afford it. We can't do it.
I know.
Did that sound like her?
But so I actually have a previous iteration of the 10-year plan, and it's almost the same amount. So at some point,
Which one was
What
that?
do
Was
you
that
mean?
the one
well,
from the last
you know
meeting?
what, they're not dated,
From the last
so
I'm
meeting.
looking at the one from the last meeting.
it might
Yeah.
have been.
So these are different than last meeting because the number. So I assume 750,000.
Yeah.
So that's what that is. And none of those reflect. Like this is what it is. It's
600.
six and then like 9 something and then 4. I have to go back to
Yeah.
the slide.
Yeah.
I've got it here.
So it's not going to be the
600,
same as what you saw.
984,
No, and I
That's
realize
9 and
that.
1.4.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
I mean, so I'm looking at the
Third
third tier,
Yeah.
but the previous one was almost as much as the third tier. I mean, there's not a huge
expenditures,
difference.
you mean?
Yeah, 1.8
Is that what
total
you have from the-
expenditures. So, I mean, if it's that close and Doug says it's
Bring my other-
Doug, you're on the
doable,
house.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
No, that's still because this is quite a bit more because that's
This is
yeah.
This
That's
is
right. That's
from,
650.
48 hours.
600,000.
Yes, yeah, that's 1.2,
Two,
but I
this
have
one's
one that's
1.8.
1.8.
So this was
One
from last
version.
meeting.
Okay,
Okay.
maybe that
That
was
was
maybe.
the version from 2 months
Yeah,
ago.
Maybe it is
you
the
know
first
what,
one.
if we could date these
That would
when
be
they're
helpful.
printed
I'll
out.
add a
helpful
date
for our
to stuff,
agents.
yes.
Yeah, thank you,
The electronic file is dated, but you're right. On the document,
yeah,
it's not.
thank
That
you.
would help.
So, but I mean, at some point, that was a viable option as
Alrighty.
well, so.
So,
And that was probably the first draft.
That was the first draft.
You know,
Right.
and we had probably a lot of things in there. I don't remember what we cut.
Yeah, are
Lauren?
there, sorry, one last question. So is there anything other than this, what's in the plan, the capital plan, other than this, that can be put off?
That's a good question.
maybe.
I mean,
Maybe.
it
Nothing in
just,
this year that I've seen, because we already talked about this year's budget.
Right.
quite later than this.
yeah, just sort of spitballing that.
But
anyway.
future years we can look at.
Yes. Okay. I'm good. Thank you.
Lauren?
I like the idea of the longer term plan, the full, package. I just have to trust the numbers and that it's not an overreach or an overstretch and that we are being conservative in our future thoughts, but also kind of back to David's point, like that we are spending wisely, and that the money that we are going to spend, like I really truly believe that the children's area is a great place for the investment. So if we're going to spend the money, this is a great place to do it. And people are going to see it and talk about it and totally.
And having a nice library shows a healthy community that
Absolutely.
people want to move in and
So
be
I'm
part of that. It's a huge
totally
centerpiece.
excited about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I just, because I'm not a numbers person, I have to just have faith that like you're really saying like
Lauren?
it's doable and I can, and
I know, so working with Ryan for, I think 8 years now, I've never felt like he has steered us in the wrong direction or
Right.
taken advantage of the community and got us in over our head, ever.
Right.
He's always been fiscally responsible, and that's part of why I enjoyed being on this board
Okay.
for such a long time. So
Very
if
good.
that helps.
Yeah.
I
Joe,
trust.
One thing I can also say, Joe and I were just talking about like visiting the places that have implemented our suggestions,
Mhm.
and like how you never know what's gonna happen. And I think one thing you should feel good about there, Ryan's not gonna say this, none of the people here are gonna say it, but like there aren't too many libraries that I've worked with out of the last 100 that could have implemented as much of what I suggested in as short a time and had such an impact on the space already. So the fact that they've actually already changed things, they've taken control of this, they've been ahead of us. Joe and I for virtually this entire process.
Okay.
So we're going to have to catch up to like what they've actually already done. That we've
Okay.
just been
So
talking
people
about.
are on board and
Yeah, because the biggest problem with the new library is not the investment. It's that we'll create something and you won't know how to operate it.
Mhm.
That's the real risk.
Okay.
And I think here it's the opposite.
Okay.
Like
We're
have
ready
to
for
keep
it
up.
and
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
And
We're not voting, but I give
Yeah,
my
not
stamp of approval.
Caroline, your thoughts?
Go big or go home.
Gary?
Well, I like the idea that if we start with the youth, especially the middle
Part of the
class,
library.
yeah, and because you've got grandparents, you've got then teens that come, that I like that. I just wanted to know how long it was all going to take because nothing's worse than when you drag things out. And it's always, yes, we're updating.
Oh,
And
that's
so
very-
that's why I was thinking the full, number 3, because you see the impact and then you can go on and that first push for fundraising to me, we're all, sorry, David, not that we don't need it, but if we had to, we'd have more energy at that. That's how I see it. And the community would be behind it. Am I making myself clear there?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you'll have
I would
more.
agree. Like the capital campaign,
Mhm.
the more you're trying to achieve and put out there, the more people are gonna want to participate.
Well, and I think it's been a long time, and I've been in the community over 40 years, for this much impact to happen, boom, like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've added on here and there, but I think this is
This is
a
an
whole
overhaul.
new way
Yeah,
to
this is
look at libraries.
yeah.
I've been touting that to all my friends. This is something new, and we have to grow and go with what's happening. We can't just
I
stay
was just
here.
saying, I've been reinvesting in the library with the workshop and the number of people that are coming in, and that was just one little area, that we've done that, I think, when we do that we'll get
Even others
the
for
support
different.
and then they can see that we're a working board.
Putting our money where our mouth is or our mouth where right.
I know this is totally divergent-ish, but I remember when my sister was graduating from college and she went to Grinnell, the liberal arts school in Iowa. And one of their big things that they always draw people to are the library. And that's because they have all these little nooks and crannies and holes where the students could go and kind of be in their own space or a bigger space, but they were built into like the stacks in the buildings. And I remember going, I never want to leave this library. It was so cool. So I loved being able to see that can be integrated with that wall that's being built. And because, the biggest thing for an adult or a teen or a middle schooler is don't look at me. And, being loud. So
And
I
of course,
think
being
I think as you were saying, it's going to make a huge difference and really increase use.
the impact to staff, will they be willing to take all this on?
I don't know, what do you say, staff?
Hey, we're all here, we're all here.
We don't want people to run
Is Miguel gonna,
screaming.
yeah, looking for more people to help
Right.
him?
Is this where I don't tell people I know how to write a grant?
So we're at pretty much the time we had allocated for this talk.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what's next. Ryan, it sounds like the board consensus is around Plan 3. What do you need from the board tonight? Does this say information, possible action? Do you need action from the board, or is this just direction for what's going to go into budget for voting on next week?
I mean, we're gonna vote on the budget next week. I guess it's up to the board. What do you want to do, Mr. President?
If we're voting on the budget next week, I think does anyone have an objection to these numbers being what we put in the budget?
No.
All right. I don't think we need an action tonight then. Let's get us a finalized budget. Oh, wait. Yes?
I do have a question. It's kind of piggybacks off of what Bonnie's concerns were with the tariffs and that. You want a budget 1.399, or
Oh,
Joe, would you suggest a different number?
What contingency would make this
Yeah, how-
comfortable?
Yeah, we have a 10% contingency built in.
you do.
That probably has been already absorbed by most recent round of. We had 2 rounds of tariff calculations built in before our contingency. So we are nervous about ongoing escalation. We estimate pretty frequently during the process, and it's not unusual to have to tailor the final documents to meet an established budget. So if you can build in a little wiggle room, great. If you can't, we will work towards it. There's always a hierarchy of priorities, and bid documents are structured within the requirements of Illinois Public Body Procurement to maximize our ability to use alternates. But at some point, we are going to work with the estimating process to define an affordable base bid. It might not include everything, but we work towards an established budget.
We can prioritize it.
I don't know how much more to sort of add
Yeah.
to say. you've got
Doug,
a good cushion.
if we said 1.5, would that
That
be
was
good?
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, if you had $100,000, we'll be safer, but if you don't, we'll do absolutely the best that we can. And
To keep it.
My question to
Yeah.
Doug, can we
Doug,
afford
Doug,
Yeah.
another
Yeah,
100,000
we
if
can
needed?
Doug,
Okay,
okay.
let's estimate.
Put that in the budget
Yeah.
for
1.5 for this project in the
Okay.
budget.
just to be safe.
All right. Any other discussion tonight?
Could we get copies
Of all
of that,
yeah,
what was
slides,
the
the
presentation,
slides,
please?
Sure, that would give us something to study.
Thank you. This was really
Yeah.
a great
Both of you
presentation.
guys are
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
So concluding that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I second.
There's 3 seconds.
Everyone.
3 times 2 is 6
Right.
seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? We are adjourned at 8:33 p.m.
Very good.
Yes.
Dish.
Made it.